Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 739. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. This is the 1995 version of Warhammer Quest. So kind of to preface this one, what you're going to see here is sort of a custom built job. Some of the components and stuff are the original. Most of it is not. Basically the models are original and everything else isn't. I have played over the last couple of months almost 30 games of this, and I got it and then played a few games of it and thought, okay, this is something I'm going to enjoy. So then I spent some more time kind of custom building stuff, selling off pieces of it because you can get a ridiculous amount for it online, and then kind of rebuilding it with custom cards and boards and all that kind of stuff. Because I really went down kind of a rabbit hole over the last couple of months with this. And so I'm going to show you the game, and if you've never seen the game or heard of the game, I'll give you kind of an overview of how it basically works and kind of the gist of it, and show you some of the different kind of custom components that are out there, fan-made components that you can get access to and that kind of stuff. And then I'll kind of come back here and talk about kind of dungeon crawls in general, but kind of where this sits, some of its flaws, because there are some flaws. I mean, it's a 1995 game, but there's a lot less flaws than I thought it was going to have. And just to kind of give you a little bit of a preface here, last year, I think it was last year, I reviewed Warhammer Quest Cursed City. Did not enjoy it at all. I have been a fan, as you can see here, of basically all of the new Warhammer Quest, Silver Tower, Blackstone Fortress especially, and was always kind of curious about this one. And then I got into a conversation with some folks after my Cursed City kind of blog / review thing, and I said, okay, I'm going to try to scrounge it together and take a look at this game and see how it works out. And then I was like, okay, they're right, this is really good. And then I kind of dove more and more into it. So let's go down to the table and I'll show you what I got there. Kind of a little show and tell. I'll have some links to some of this stuff if you get interested in like how to build up your own stuff and all that kind of thing. And then we'll come back here and I'll just probably talk for way too long. Okay, so I've got a bunch of stuff just kind of scattered all over the table here. You can see there's tons of decks of cards there, stack of boards here and here. I throw out some of my models that I've actually got a chance to paint up. Lots of books, lots of printed out books, some original books, and then kind of just swath of mostly unpainted, but some painted models there as well. And some that I have taken kind of out of my collection from Warhammer Age of Sigmar armies, but I kind of made a rule for myself to keep the aesthetic. So any models that were printed during the Warhammer Fantasy Old World run, whether or not they could have been done in 2005, well after 1995, I still kept those here. But there's definitely some models that are very Age of Sigmar styled that I didn't think would fit. Although I have thrown some proxies in there. You can maybe see there's a bunch of corn and stuff there as Chaos Warriors and stuff like that, but I'm not really satisfied with how those look. But what I have done is taken, like, for example, like these old orcs here. These exist in the Age of Sigmar world, but those models existed, a long time ago. And some of these sort of Tomb Kings-esque skeletons, those ogres and stuff, those are older models that exist in fantasy, although they're relatively new fantasy models. But I still find those the aesthetic works fine there. Anyway, that's not really that important. You could proxy up whatever you want, because this is an old game and who cares. And so the only really like official thing here are these models here. So here's the wizard that comes in the box, and I've painted up there. You can see I rebased these because they all come with square bases, so I'm just going to round base everything, because if I was going to pull in some of my Age of Sigmar stuff that exists, they're all round bases and I'm not rebasing them. So I like round bases better. So that's really the only official thing. Some of the original books and stuff, which I'll show you, are original. These are not. The boards, the cards, all this stuff is sort of hand printed, handmade. These are handmade, printed out on like glossy paper. I'll put links to how to do that with like an artist board there. And so yeah, they look really like they look identical to the originals, but those I chopped up and sold off the cards. Some of these other tokens and stuff are original here, and some other things that I got rid of. But anyway, so some of these other cardboard tokens, those are original as well, and some are handmade actually. So when you get the game, if you don't know, you basically get a barbarian, a wizard, an elf, and then this little dwarf guy. Some of these other characters here are different expansion characters that you could get. And I had some time scrounging these up here. So you could get extra character expansions and stuff like that. But basically you play with these starting 4. And just a quick review point, I think you don't really need much more than starting 4, although I've had a ton of fun with some of these other characters. There's some drawbacks to these other characters, which I'll talk about kind of at the end. But if you were going to get in this game, I would say, you know what, you don't really need much more than these 4. Definitely for a long time to come. So the idea of the game is that you're going to be going through these dungeons, and these dungeons are going to have different rooms. These are some of the different objective rooms here. Some of these are printouts from like White Dwarfs or expansions, or even some fan-made ones here, like this one here. That's kind of a fan-made unofficial one, which I'll talk about. Specifically, the guy that makes this stuff is just, he's an amazing individual. So yeah, you kind of draw a card that matches these objective rooms here. So here's some of the cards and stuff that I have printed out. Now, not all of these are like in the perfect like font scaling. So this one's actually, you can't really tell on camera actually, but it's a little bit off compared to these. So these files are available online with all of these images and stuff. And so you can go to a place called Make Playing Cards and make all of these, and you can make these big ones and stuff like that. So anyway, you draw a card here, and then you roll a die based on which objective room you get, and then it generates for you an adventure, which you'll pull out of an adventure book. You know, there's 6 basically adventures for each of these cards, so 6 times however many cards is how many different kind of like little encounters and stuff that you can have. And then you have these other dungeon cards here, and you'll shuffle that objective card into the bottom of this deck and somewhere in the bottom 6, and then you start to reveal these, and then they'll have different rooms as you start to explore, which you can see here on the middle of the table. Anytime basically you have one of these like square rooms, you'll flop a card out of this event deck, which can be made from monsters or events. And so I print out all these event cards, and you can see some of these are expansion ones. Like this is if you're in a level 1 or 2 dungeon, or a level 2 or 3 dungeon. Currently these guys are all level 2. And you have different events, and some of these events will reference the role-playing book. So as you go through here and start to explore these rooms, you'll flip over cards which might say, hey, get 1d6 plus 3 skeleton spearmen, and those will come out. Or you might have, I got lucky there, this one here is a sliding wall event, and so on. And so that's what all of these cards are here. Most of the time these are all going to be packed away in a box, because those are huge decks of cards for each of the different levels that match this giant table that's in the role-playing book that comes with this, and also in some of the other expansion books and stuff. So those kind of get shuffled together. So here you've got all of these are my like level 2 models that I own. And then on the back side here, I went and printed out all the cards, but if I ever went and picked up some of these models, I could start to shuffle these ones into this deck and build it up. And one of the neat things about this is some of these files online, they have kind of like a color coding there. So these are Chaos Dwarves here, so they got kind of a red theme. Undead has that kind of off yellow. And this one you can't really see on camera. It's like a white, just kind of generic bad guy. Let's see here, ghouls, savage orcs. See, it's kind of a green one. So if you want to like theme up your deck, you can just kind of take these out, shuffle them in. And then as you play the game, you'll realize like, okay, when I run into 3 ogres, that's much harder than running into a group of bats, you know, or something like that. So you can kind of difficulty scale, maybe throw a couple of really hard ones in there, then throw in some fodder, however you want to kind of customize it and do it that way. I've just been playing with basically kind of throwing the kitchen sink in, and that's been pretty fun. I'll talk about more of that later. So as you go through here, you start to reveal event cards, you fight different monsters and stuff. Every turn, one of the characters, usually the wizard, is going to roll what's called the power die. And this shows you how much mana you have available that turn. So if you roll a 6, that's really good, because you've got 6 mana to spend on top of any kind of power that the wizard or whatever caster might have. However, anytime you roll a 1, and if you don't have any luck tokens to spend to reroll the 1, which probably wouldn't be a good idea, but you could do that if you wanted. So anytime you roll a 1 though, you flop a card off this event deck. So you could get kind of bad guy on top of bad guy on top of an evil event, you know, kind of coming at you. So the game can really kind of twist and turn and really hit you in the face, especially early on, and I would say probably forever on. So it's something you really have to watch out for. And characters can die in the game. So there is, and this is one of the best parts of the game. One of the absolute best parts of the game is the threat of absolute permanent death. It's also one of the worst parts of the game. I'll talk about that more in the review. But rules as written, your barbarian dies, he's gone, and that's it. He ain't coming back. If you want to roll up a brand new level 1 barbarian with all the starting stats and skills and items, feel free to do it, but this one is dead. Now, it doesn't end your current quest through the dungeon if one of your characters dies. You could theoretically make it through with all 3. Probably will not, unless it's kind of in the final battle. But you can actually escape the dungeon too and make an attempt to escape it. And that is usually almost as bad as death, because it does give you an out, but it is not like an easy out. Because lots of times you will lose like lots of gold, all your treasure, have a chance of just dying on your escape. So once you escape your dungeon, and you'll collect here, let's see if I can zoom over there, it's not too glary. Yeah. So you have these different stacks of treasure cards, and these I think is pretty close to all of the treasure cards that are out there and available. White Dwarf, some fan-made stuff. I'll talk about the fan-made stuff, and there's a lot of junk out there in my opinion, but there's a couple of really amazing things. And then you have here your objective room treasure cards. So anytime you flop a monster card here, let's say these are terrible. Let's say we flop this mummy. So anytime the mummy card or any monster card comes out, alongside of that, paired with that, will be a treasure card. So when you beat the monster, you will see you'll get a certain amount of gold. So in this case, you get 450 gold for the mummy, because mummies are a huge pain. And then you also get a treasure card. Or if you had like 10 skeletons come out, you get however many gold per skeleton that you kill, and then treasure card, which will get kind of divided up between the players. When you fight the final bosses in the final room, you get the objective level ones. These are usually worth more, and they're way better. And some of them are very, very strong. But after you go through your dungeon and do that, then you're actually going to have to make a trip back to town, which might, well, I don't know that anything has actually tried to kill me on the way back from town. Definitely in town, stuff will kill you. You'll take a certain number of days, and then you'll go over here. Let's zoom over there. And these are some really cool handouts. I'll give you a close-up of these in a minute. But you'll try to get to a village or settlement, and then your characters will try to level up. They'll buy some supplies. If you have any kind of like range character with an archer, or somebody uses pistols, you'll need to get arrows or gunpowder and that kind of stuff. And you have to get that, or else you can't use that ranged weapon in the next adventure. So you're going to go there, and then kind of just live there for a few days, and you got to pay like rent and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of other stuff that goes on. And then you go back and kind of roll up a new quest, a new adventure, and you just kind of keep playing and leveling up and see how long you can keep your characters alive before they all wipe out. That's basically the whole point of the game. So just some other kind of component stuff. So you'll see here, I've recently been playing with this guy, almost all expansion characters, and these I've really enjoyed all these. Here's the questing knight. These guys are all currently level 2. We have here, this is an elf war dancer, really fun, really good for fighting lots of different smaller monsters, and this guy's actually really good for fighting the bigger ones. So these kind of work out well together. Then we have here the Imperial Noble, who has some interesting stuff. He's got a really powerful pistol that he can use, and he also has an interesting way of fighting mostly smaller monsters, but he got an interesting couple of ideas with how his combat works for the bigger monsters. And then we have the Warrior Priest, which everybody says is the absolute worst character in the game. I don't know if I would 100% disagree with that. I might mildly disagree with that, but I think it's mostly because the Chaos Warrior and the Troll Slayer seem like they're in town stuff. It's just like absurdly like difficult and random. And even the questing knight, like his in-town stuff is a little bit like, what can happen to you? You can walk into the Baron's castle and then be killed in a duel. Like, holy cow, that would suck. But he's not super great, but he's okay. I would say my tidbit on him would be to not necessarily take the starting blessings, because they're I don't know. There's one good one in there that I always use, but I would get some healing in here, get a healing blessing. So he has like a straight heal, because he also has this amulet where he rolls 3 dice. If you get a pair, which we did there, then you can heal. You select which warriors you want to heal. They go, I can heal one warrior 5 and another one 5, or here, spend both of these on one warrior to heal him back up. But you have to randomly roll a double or 3 of a kind. And if you roll double ones, anybody that you nominated to be healed gets hurt for 2 hit points, which could be terrible because if you're trying to heal them and they'll have like, 1 hit point left, then you're gonna end up killing them with your stupid necklace. And you have to be standing adjacent to them and all this. So, and his combat is truly pretty bad out of the gate. But I think as you level him up, he won't be so bad. Now here you can see character cards. We've got profiles here that show kind of as they advance. You can see like what their 2 hit is. So basically the combat is a D6. So if my combat is a 4, your combat is a 4, I probably need a 4 to hit you. It's kind of that scaling weird oddball old style Games Workshop chart. So you can see here, so Imperial Noble here has a weapon skill 4. So if I'm fighting something with a weapon skill of 2, I need a 3. If I'm fighting something with like, 4, 5, 6, 7, I just need a 4. That kind of thing. So now one thing you're going to want to do, what you'll have to do is you'll have these character sheets here, because you're going to get a lot of items and abilities and stuff that aren't going to be represented necessarily by a treasure card or something. You want to keep track of that. It doesn't start off so bad. So these guys are all level 2. This guy's got some extra stuff going on. The questing knight's a little bit more complicated than some of the other characters, but you want to have this. You can keep track of their wounds, the amount of gold they have, and so on. So these guys here, like I said, they're all level 2 here. And these guys are still alive. I'm still going to be using them. Keith, the barbarian here, I actually got him to level 3. And then Billy, and the rest of these guys are level 2. The elf, the wizard, and the pit fighter, who's also pretty fun. Now these guys here, let's see, Leroy and Gotrek, I haven't actually played with the Chaos Warrior or the Troll Slayer, just because, like I said, when I looked at how their town events work, I was like, oh, that looks like not much fun. Now these guys are all dead. So you got William, the elf ranger, the witch hunter, and then Brew, which is the normal dwarf. They're all dead. They got to level 2 and died. So my thought was, when I initially got this, I was like, let me play through a little bit. So I played with the 4 basic characters, got them all up to level 2, had a couple of, I think I had 2 total party wipes in that process. And then we got kind of on a roll, got some good treasures, got some healing potions and stuff, some good skills. So I got them to level 2. And I was like, okay, this game is fun. I kind of get it now. So then I kind of went all in on all this other stuff. And then got some of all the other extra characters that you can get. I didn't get any that are like in the death blow. Just anything that had like an official box, at the time. Like so that you could get it, at the time, you could get a Troll Slayer box. It comes with the rules, comes with everything, come with the model. They did this thing called Death Blow magazine or something, and from what I've seen, everything there is sort of not really completed, is kind of half-baked and stuff. But before we jump into some of the different rule sets and things like that, I just want to make one kind of clear thing. Now it's very, very simple. Let me move my camera. Like I said, it's like a single D6 combat, so it starts off really basic, but I've seen with a lot of these different characters and stuff, the little nuances and stuff that they do with this really simple system is pretty cool. It is worth some commendation, and there's some merit to it. So for example, like this Imperial Noble here, let's take his thing. So he's got a weapon skill of 3 or 4 now. And then if he gets a hit, so he gets a 4, let's say that's a hit, then you're gonna roll D6, his sword or rapier damage is a 6 plus his strength. His strength is 3, so we're gonna do that. So that's 5, okay. So if the monster's toughness is let's say 5, it's going to block all that damage because you've got 3 plus the 2. But he has an ability where if he gets a hit, no matter what, he gets another hit, and he gets another hit, even if he does no damage. So he can sit there and sort of ching, 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 and pick away at a thing and just kind of pick it away. So that's pretty kind of a neat thing. And then the War Dancer here has another type of thing where he can actually kind of move after combat and stuff. And so I don't want to get mired in the details of all of these different characters, but there is really a good amount of asymmetry between the characters. Like honest to God, it's such a dead simple system, but the balance and the kind of the difference between each of these different kind of character types is really cool. I mean, the wizard definitely is probably the strongest spellcaster in the game. Like he is bar none the best spellcaster. But you have this ranger here who's really a really good spellcaster, but he's also pretty decent at combat. Now you have the warrior priest here. I think he's probably just more of a slow burn. Like I haven't played him up that much, but that's kind of your 3 different spellcasters. And all of these different warriors are pretty different too. So like the witch hunter is really neat, but he can be really powerful, I think, but he's very, very luck driven. And so when you roll him up, he gets his amulets and some of these other things that go along with him. They can really get you out of a jam. But if you don't really get him to the point where he's beefed up enough, then it's not really going to do much for you. So anyway, I just want to make a mention there. And the same goes with all the different monsters and stuff like that. There is a nice little balancing here because even though there's like just slight differences in stats, some of the different special rules and things like that, you might say, well, these guys are about, you can kind of tell how hard they are based on the gold that they reward per model. But it is really well done as far as that's concerned. Like, I think that is one of the strong suits of this game, is the simplistic general mechanic system, but there's been enough sort of iteration and stuff like that on just tweaks and stuff that really I have to commend. So let's go through some of the literature real quick to kind of give you a better sense of how the game's going to flow, kind of what's out there and stuff, and then we'll jump up to my talking head. Okay, I'm just going to go through this big old stack here of stuff, not necessarily in any order. So here you've seen the character sheets, great. This is a player aid here. This is very simply the rules of the whole game, of going through the dungeon and all that kind of stuff, how to do the setup, everything like that. This is by Universal Head. You can get this on Board Game Geek. I printed out in some good cardstock there. Just definitely recommend doing that. You won't need it after your first couple games. This booklet here contains all of the rules for all of those different extra characters that I showed you, right? So you got the Bretonnian Knight, everything like that. So these are kind of recreations of the original rule books. Now some of these have been kind of converted into some a little bit better of a layout, but if we flip forward here, some of them out there like this are like scans of it, right? So you can find these pretty readily. And I'll have links to some Facebook groups and some good online resources for this kind of stuff. You can find it all over the place. Now these are really neat. These are some fan-made materials here. So when your characters go and they finish their dungeon, they get back to a location, you're either going to end up at a village, and this will show you here the different places you can visit, and so that way you can just put your little guy in there and keep track of where they're at. And sometimes you have to roll to see if you found that particular store, and once you get to a store, you're going to roll if they have certain things in stock, which I don't really know about that. I think it's okay. I got some comments on that. And then here, if you have an extra cube or dice or something, you can track how many days and weeks you were there. And you can see, because they have living expenses. So in a village, it's only 1 gold per day, but if you have a dog and a mule or whatever, it'll increase that. And for after your second week, or starting at the end of your second week, and then every week after that, you're gonna roll on a catastrophic table, because otherwise you're gonna roll daily events that may or may not occur to you. You might get mugged, or you might get sucked into a gambling game or some other stupid stuff that steals all your gold. Not stupid, not 100% of it's stupid. So here's a settlement location, and this can either be a town or a city. And it's the same general places are available, but in a city, you have a better chance of finding what you're looking for. So if you're looking for the Wizards Guild, you roll 3 dice instead of 2 dice to look for it. And your living expenses will go up. So you see if you're in a town, it's only $2 or it's $3. And then you have the different modifications if you got pack animals with you. But there's more stuff to find, and you can get certain things. You won't be able to find the really good healing potions in the village. You got to go to a city or a town for that. But you have to spend more time journeying from the dungeon to get to the bigger towns and stuff, because the dungeons are far away. They're not going to be right next to a city, because the city watch will have cleared them out. So you can get to a village location basically after 2 weeks of travel, a town after 4, and a city after 6. And there's some other special ones here. The Wood Elf Troop. So if you got, back in the day, if you got the Wood Elf, the War Dancer, you would get this rules for this with you, but somebody made a little nice board for it. And then you've got a harbor location. This is actually in a White Dwarf. There's a whole set of things where you go on kind of cruising around the coastlines and stuff like that. Now here is also, let's see here. These are a bunch of cool things. Now this stuff is all in books and stuff, but there's these nice little printouts to show you what these guys have in stock. So if you visit the apothecary, what do you have to roll to see if they have the healing potions in stock? How much do they cost? And there's just a ton of these, right? And there's some other little player aids and stuff that you can find there. And then we have here, this is a book of traveling hazards, and then also I put in here, let's see here, settlement events, right? So it's two separate things, but I just print them out and bound them up like this. Now, these are basically expanding what's in the role-playing book that comes with the game. So if you get kind of sick of that same set, there's like 66 different events for the towns and the traveling. In the main book, you've got a whole bunch more here to do like that. And there's others sort of scattered throughout the rules. So sometimes there'll be different sort of event charts that you roll on based on the character that you're in and some other things like that. Here's an FAQ. There's an official FAQ there, which answered most of my questions, but I'll talk about that in the review. And here I print out some of the expansion stuff. So there was two main expansions back in the day. There was Catacombs of Terror, which is really for high level characters, to be honest with you. There's even like special travel events to get to the dungeon, because normally you don't have to do any travel events to arrive at the dungeon. But the Land of the Undead here, I think this is thematic with the old world, was so kind of far away, and you had to sort of travel through these really terrible wastelands, so it makes sense to have some events to sort of soften your character up before you even start going in the dungeon. And this was the first expansion here, Lair of the Orc Lord. And this is a fun one. You can probably start playing this after your characters hit level 2, you know, and stuff like that. Here is a fan one, and this is done by the same fella who did the hazards and event table stuff. This is called Hall of the Hag Queen. Now, he has a lot of stuff. He's got some other stuff I'm thinking about printing out. I'm not in a huge hurry to. This one's excellent. This is really, if you look at sort of how these two were laid out, the Orc Lord and the Terror one, this is like sort of a dark elf theme one. And he's got all the same kind of layouts there. He's got some really cool riff on how the unexpected events work in the dungeon here. You can see different monster stats for some, basically if you had a dark elf army at the time, you probably would have been, you know, living high on the hog with this one. And lots of cool stuff. This is awesome. I just gotta say, this is a really cool thing. Now here you have the adventure book. Now, like I was saying, you draw one of these cards randomly, you roll a die 1 through 6, and you look up which room you drew. So if we're doing the idle chamber there, so you have adventure 1, adventure 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the same with these different expansions. If you draw the card associated with this, you'd roll up on these adventure tables that are in these expansions. And these will just give you kind of general rules. Sometimes there'll be specific rules to the particular chamber that might have different effects and stuff. And they'll tell you kind of what to do. Normally what you do is you will roll on this objective room monster table here, which would be just kind of a harder group of monsters. But this is all designed for level 1 characters. Now, if you get past level 1, this table of monsters here is going to start to be easier and easier, especially if you're level 3, you would just wipe through these pretty quick. So what happens here is now we move to the role play book. And so in the role play book, there's all kinds of stuff. And this is where it starts to add in all of the things from traveling to the town, the different town events, how to level your characters up. And this only covers the 4 basic characters in the game. How to level up all the other characters comes in their own little booklet there. And then you also have here, let's see, these charts of monsters. So level 9 monster table. So the idea is that when you flip a card out of your deck, you will look here and ignore, if you had the original cards from the basic game, which only have the basic monsters, you would just look at this letter. So M. So you would open up this book, look at the chart associated with your level, and then roll on it. And then it would be that monster. And if it was an E, then you would roll in the event table in the role play book. So again, what I did here is I actually converted this table to cards. And, well, I didn't do that. Some people did this already. Now I actually did it myself using a program that another guy wrote and converted all of these guys in this one to cards. So there you go. So that's online too. So if you wanted to, like, if you got a bunch of Dark Elf miniatures or something, you want to play with them at Warhammer Quest, there's a zip of cards out there. That's what I did with this dude's program. So instead of, because if you roll on this thing, you're like, well, I don't own any of these, and you roll again, I don't own any of these, and you roll again, I don't own any of these. So now you can just build up your deck, then you just put all the stuff in there that you do own, and then you just shuffle those up, and it's just a lot easier. So that's this thing. And then here's the basic rule book. Very simple to get you going on your first thing. It talks about movement and combat and casting and stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. And then lastly here you have this compendium, and this is all of the White Dwarf articles that added like new modes and stuff and little special quests, and there's even little objective rooms in here with a couple adventures and stuff like that. So I printed those out. Haven't really faffed around too much with this, but it looks pretty cool. Cool enough that I went to the trouble of printing this out, as well as printing out some of the different boards and stuff. There's like little weird chambers. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah, so some of these like little special chambers and stuff were in some of that White Dwarfs. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of the game. You kind of go through your adventure, you sort of randomly draw out the different rooms, and it takes over lots of your table, and you've got to kind of reposition everything. And then you hopefully finish the adventure, you go back to town. I hope you don't get messed up too much on your way back to town. You do some shopping, you do some leveling up, and you keep going and going and going and going. So let's jump up to my talking head. Okay, so I know that was a little bit of a scattershot overview of Warhammer Quest, kind of more of a show and tell type of thing. In terms of the card printouts and all that stuff. And again, I'll have links to a lot of this stuff below. The Make playing cards, some of the Facebook fan pages. There's basically 2 really active ones, and a bunch of stuff like that. So quickly, I'll do my normal kind of pillars of review, like player count and play time. Now, I've only played this solo, and I'd say play time usually is probably an hour per adventure if you include going to town and stuff like that. Maybe an hour and a half, because sometimes you can just get into like a knockdown drag out. And now in terms of solo, I don't know that I ever want to play this other than solo, to be honest with you. And I know I mentioned this at the beginning during some part of that walkthrough, but probably one of the best parts about the game, and the worst, is that your characters can absolutely just die, and they can really die by some random dumbass blind luck. And that to me is there's a couple things that are a fault of the game. Now I would say it's not a fault of the overall system at all. Like, I don't think the fact that your characters can die is a negative. I think that's a positive, actually. But some of the ways that they can die are not good. Now, if you get into a dungeon situation and things are just snowballing and they're just going horrible for you and your whole party wipes out, like, that to me is okay. And frankly, that's going to happen, especially with your first all level 1 characters. We take those base game characters too. They are just going to get wiped out. And like I said, I played this. I was trying to keep track of the count here right before I started recording, and it's somewhere between 25 and 30 games of this. Now, at least probably 6 of those have been level 1 total party kills. Just complete, they just ate dirt and they were done, and that was it. Because you don't really have some of the luck mitigation tools when you're going in there fresh. You don't really have any. You might have 1 health potion. You don't really have a couple that you could rely on. You don't have any bandages. You don't have any luck, because you don't really start getting luck until you're level 2 with most of the characters. And the luck allows you to reroll any dice, basically, which is kind of a cool thing. Luck lets you reroll any dice you want. If it was a monster attack, or you could reroll the power roll at the beginning, which might trigger an unexpected event. You can roll them back in town if you get some crappy event in town. So having that luck is really, you want to really save that. Like, don't save that for something silly like I missed a hit. Never reroll a hit with luck. Like, that would be a complete waste of time. But like, there is, in my mind, there's one event, and like you saw, I printed out all the event cards, and I printed out all the references to the role-playing book and a bunch of other events and some of the expansions and all kinds of other stuff, and White Dwarf events and everything. So I shuffle those up. There's one event, and it's in the role-playing book, where if you roll kind of bad, you basically will say the room seals up and all your warriors suffocate and die. And I'm like, what? No, I'm not. I'm never playing with that event in the deck. And so whenever that comes up, I'll grab another random event out of the master deck and throw it in there and see what it does. So like, that thing is stupid. There's a couple of things like that where it's just like, oh, you're dead. Like, there's not really any chance. But in the case of, like, I'm trying to escape, because if things start to go bad, you can try to escape and bail out of the dungeon, and then you're really, like, you are up against it, right? And that's okay. To me, it's like you're trying to escape, things have just gone horribly wrong, it's bad luck on top of bad luck, on top of maybe poor decision. It's a natural sort of cause things, and we're trying to bail out. You're trying to pull the ripcord at the last second and get out of jail free, so luck should be really against you, and so you can instantly die that way as well. Or just, as you escape, the rules will tell you, like, you get beat up so much you lose 2d6 wounds, and if you don't have any healing potions or whatever to pop at the time, then you'd be dead. So, okay, I can deal with that kind of stuff. Or some of the rooms have like a bridge that you walk across, and you're like, well, I have to walk across this bridge, and if I roll a 1, and then I think another 1, depending on the bridge, some of the objective room rules are, confused in my head, and then your character dies. Okay. So there's a couple of things like that bug me, but again, you want to really play this like a role-playing game, so if it bugs you, then don't use it. And I know like the board game side of my brain goes, no, you have to play like as the rules were written. But there's a reason the big old thick book is called the role play book, because you're trying to make a good fun story. And for me, I would say some people might not even want that permanent death. Like maybe their character's knocked out and they lick their wounds, and maybe they lose all the treasure and gold that they found on this particular run or something like that. Yeah, you could do that, but over the long haul, that's going to make the game repetitive, I think, and there's not going to be enough drama. So I tried to stick as close to the spirit of the rules as I did, but there's some of those where it's just like randomly you're dead, that I'm like, nope, I'm not doing a random, because my guy just did fine. He's at full health. He has all this stuff. He just kicked the crap out of like 3 ogres and a mummy and 3 minotaurs, you know what I mean? So, and then you just like on your event on the way back to town, it's like, oh, you're dead. No, I'm not playing that. And so anyway, so that's, again, so the play count, that's always circling back to the play count thing. I think it'll be hard to get a group of, let's say, 4 people, 4 of us, and everybody kind of be on the same page with that. Because some people, like I said, may not be on the page with, I don't want my character to be able to die at all, and if things go bad, they might get frustrated and just kind of toss their hands up in the air and say, I don't really want to play this again, which I can understand. So to me, this is really, this might be the best solo game that I've ever played, honestly. I'll have more thoughts about that in a minute, but in terms of like story generation, in terms of like procedurally generating story, this is really, excellent. It's amazing how it works, and it leaves enough gap for me to fill in the blanks, and part of it, I should say, has to do with, again, this is all personal, but the way that I've constructed it. I'm not saying I've constructed it in the best way, but for me, by taking like that Dark Elf fan expansion, the Orc expansion, the Undead expansion, having these extra models in here, and then sort of filling up that monster deck and the event deck, in a way, the game has allowed me to kind of construct my own little corner of the old world, of the old Warhammer world, and have these characters kind of running around, doing little quests for different kings and nobles and stuff like that. And, the way that different town events work for the different types of characters. So it starts to sort of smatter in and sort of color in this world that just I've had a lot of fun kind of living in, and just, letting these characters kind of live and breathe and die in. So for me, that whole story engine has just been really, really amazing. Now, there's an interesting part to that. And this game has also made me appreciate a game called Shadows of Brimstone even more. And I've always read and heard that Shadows of Brimstone was basically a love letter to this game. Now, after playing through this game, I'm like, holy crap, it is. Shadows of Brimstone basically took all of those things that I think people would have problems with this game, like the instant death stuff, and the way some of those unexpected events and things can just like really beat your head in when you're going through a dungeon, and the scaling of it and all these other things, the different town events and the travel events and all that stuff, and really just brought it into the modern day. So here's the trick, though. This is the interesting thing. Like, this does all of that. The Warhammer Quest does all of that with a very minimal amount of components. I know I showed you like a bunch of boards and cards and all this stuff, but none of that lives on the table. There's a small couple of decks of cards off to the side that you can set up. You don't need all these other cards all out at the same time. You have some cards with your characters and the character sheets and stuff like that. The boards you can all stack in a corner. And you don't have too many rooms. There's like 12 rooms maybe through a dungeon, unless you find it early, find the objective room early. And a couple of books of different events and tables, which, again, I've done some of the work here to print out some of these cards, because none of that existed, with the original game. If you get the original game, you won't have all these cards. You'll have to roll on treasure tables and roll on monster tables. But to me, even doing all that, putting all that work in, it still achieves that sort of same, pretty close to the same level as Shadows of Brimstone with a lot less stuff. Now, Shadows of Brimstone, you have to have lots of decks of cards out, like tons of decks of cards. And they have all of these different like difficulty scalings for the monsters based on the level of your characters, how many characters in your party, you know, and there's all these different like interconnecting worlds and portals and stuff you can go through, because Shadows of Brimstone is like cowboys mixed with samurai, mixed with Fallout, the game, with aliens, with Cthulhu, with, you know, dinosaurs, and just all these different weird anachronistic portals that you can go through, which is really cool. I mean, it's just a neat thing. But it really does it in a way that's way more balanced. I never have had in Shadows of Brimstone. We've had, and I played it with just about every player count, actually. We've had some moments where, again, early on, it feels like you can get your face kicked in a little bit. Same with this game. Once you kind of level up a little bit, Shadows of Brimstone I think actually might become a little bit too easy. But with the revised rules, they kind of fix that because they put out a revised edition. So as you get to like up to level 8, that's basically when the game stops in Shadows of Brimstone. Like you just get to level 8 and there's not really anything else to do. You can like retire your character. And this is the same. You could theoretically get to level 10. Good luck. This is a little more brutal, especially if you know, scale the monsters. But Shadows of Brimstone is less unfair, definitely. And it's definitely more fair. You can still lose. You can still get your face kicked in. If your characters get killed, they don't necessarily just die instantly, though. They might get some corruption or some mutation or something like that. They could eventually die, but you can always resurrect them back in town if you haven't spent enough money. So they're never ever quite permanently dead. Yeah, I don't know. Like you kind of lose a little bit because of that, but I also can appreciate that that's not really for everybody. And I really like that Shadows of Brimstone does that, because Shadows of Brimstone just does so much. Like, it's not just a clone of Warhammer Quest. It is just blown it up and like pulled out every kind of like detail and stretched it and just pushed it like as far as you can go with that kind of procedurally generated RPG, dungeon crawl, storytelling kind of thing. Which brings me to kind of my final point with this is this is an interesting kind of idea, because a lot of these Warhammer Quest and Shadows of Brimstone, you might say, oh, they're a dungeon crawl. Yeah, but they're not. They have a dungeon crawl element in them, but that is more of a tactical skirmish-ish. Skirmish is using that term very lightly, but the tactics of that is more like playing D&D or Pathfinder or whatever than it is playing Descent, right? Because in Descent or Imperial Assault or Gloomhaven or something like that is almost the whole game. I mean, Gloomhaven has some story stuff too, but it's on a rails. Like the new Descent is you're on a rails with a story. Even if you're playing Descent 2nd Edition or Imperial Assault, you're playing through a fixed campaign, and once you do it, you're done. Shadows of Brimstone and Warhammer Quest are these procedurally generated, just RPG sandboxes. And I think it just, even though there's some similarities and there's some stuff there and there's some fantasy battles and you're moving around on a grid, it puts them way off on their own sort of genre. And I don't think there's really any other two games like this. I mean, maybe Advanced Hero Quest was back in the day, but I mean, that don't really exist. Neither does this. And everything that I've heard and read said this is just blows Advanced Hero Quest out of the water. But that element of it to me is so important for this kind of style of game, to see if people can really, I think it's hard, I'm trying to express what is so special about Shadows of Brimstone in this compared to some of these other dungeon crawls that maybe have some story elements and stuff like that. But I think it gets down to the point of leaving enough gaps in the story to not like just feed me a narrative, which I enjoy. I mean, if you looked at my reviews last year, Descent Legends of the Dark was high in my top 10 list. It was amazing. But it is, like I said, it's just one story. But letting you have the kind of the toolkit and giving you kind of the system to do this, to me, it's just way more engaging of a thing, to let you sort of have the system and live and breathe. And and have ups and downs. You know, people are dying. You know, people are doing amazing things, having great moments in the combat or back in town, and that kind of stuff. So just the generation of that is really neat. And I think a lot of these other games kind of are missing the boat, although I think it's really, really hard to do that. Even this one is not perfect, Warhammer Quest, because I said some of those death things, or just some of the things where like, oh, you lost half your gold, and you're like, what? I was gonna go level up, but I lost half my gold. Or, you know what, you were on your way to the town or the city, but you got lost, and guess what, you have to end up at a village, and you're like, well, no, I don't want to be in a village. I want to go and buy the good healing potions, because next time we used all the healing potions last game, and now I need more. But you have to like let yourself go, you know what, in real life shit goes wrong and comes sideways and comes out of left field, and so you have to let yourself sort of breathe with that a little bit. And so the approach here that I've taken is I started playing through, reset everything, got some more stuff, started playing through, wiped. 3 of my characters are dead. I had a couple of wipes there at level 1 and then restarted, but then my barbarian lived, so he grabbed 3 other warriors back at town, all level 1. He was level 2 at the time, so he got up to level 3, brought these guys up to level 2. I mean, there's rules for doing that. And I played through that, and I said, well, let me play with some other characters. I got another group going, and then we got all those guys up to level 2 as well. So basically, I think the way to play this is just play through until everybody's dead, and see how it went, and then you have a story to tell. You know, and I guess I know who you're going to tell. I'm not going to tell anybody. Like, you don't want to hear about my campaign. Who cares? But it's a fun little story that you can tell yourself. And so that idea, I think, is really, really important. And I really wish there would be a game like take Descent Legends of the Dark and that kind of system, and that sort of even the app driven stuff. Like, some of this could be just baked all into an app. Like, you could take all these books and stuff and just bake some of the logic and the events and the town stuff and the leveling up of the character, and you can leave some cards for the treasure deck because it's nice to pull out of physically pull them out, and you can have a character sheet and stuff and still have the board and everything, but just have the app like generate events for you and keep track of stuff. And you could have stuff like you could put your gold in the bank, and you could do this other stuff. You know, you could have an app do that kind of stuff, but still retain kind of that world building, story building aspect of it. So yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention here was, and this is kind of a fault of the game, I think, sort of, is there is some lack of clarity on some of the rules. So for example, I just had to do some digging on it, and they're not even in the FAQ, but for example, there's a really cool mechanic in this, which is really simple, but it's really neat. So you have the death blow thing. So if you hit a monster and you kill it with one hit, like I'll get to this in a minute. If you kill it with one hit, then you can go to the next square over and the next square over. So if there's like all these squares and I'm surrounded by rats or something, if I kill one, I can roll and see if I hit the next one and the next one. And everybody can do that. But it's not super clear that it says if you do it with one hit on your turn. So if the monster was already damaged on the previous turn, well, it was already damaged, but you did it on one hit that turn. And I did some digging, and there actually is one of the designers that said, no, you can still do your death blow even if there was some damage on it. So you can kind of play that how you want. The other thing is, there was one other one that was weird like that. There's a couple of things like that are just like, well, how would you do that? And it's not super clear. I would say do it with whatever's favorable to you, because the game is brutal enough anyway. I think it was with healing potions. You have to be standing next to the guy. Can you toss it to them? Can you do it after they're dead? Because when they talk about somebody dies, if you go up to them with a bandage, then you have to be next to them, and then you have to roll to see if even the bandage works, which is stupid. Like, I would take that out. It actually hasn't happened to me, because I either have a healing potion or I don't. I don't buy bandages because they only do 1d6, and it's like, whatever. That's not enough. I need a full health healing potion. So I would say, it says you have to be standing next to the guy. You've got to do it by the end of the turn, and that would be like, okay, well, the monsters go after me, so I'm not going to get a chance to really react. So that was just that kind of stuff is just a couple things like this. It's not clear actually with a healing potion like what you can do. So I just play whatever. You toss the healing potion out, and they get their health back up. And I use the healing potion, and they cost me 300 gold. So whatever. If you think it's cheating, like that's a lot of money, and you have to go roll to see if it's in stock. And one thing that's not clear is when you roll to see if something's in stock, it might say you roll and it's in stock, and then you roll how many bandages do they have. Well, some of them it's like it has one thing. So I have to sit there every day and roll to see if there's one healing potion in stock. And I just said, nope, if it's in stock, I get to buy as many as I can afford. I don't want to buy. Because you can sit there and roll, and then you have these events happen. So you go to the apothecary, I want to buy a healing potion. Okay, nothing in stock. Okay, you got mugged, and now you've lost half your gold in a treasure, or whatever. And it's like, well, what the heck? I just wanted to buy a potion and go. So anyway, so I let that happen, but then if it is in stock, I go, you have 40 in stock if I wanted 40. So that's kind of funny. The other thing is it's not really clear about when you can share treasure and stuff. And there's several parts in some of the rules that make it seem like it's pretty open-ended. But when you play like the real basic game without the campaign, then it's like you have to exactly share the treasure evenly, and then that's who it belongs to. And there's no like sharing of gold and stuff. But why do that to the healer who's in the back and who might heal up enough, stuff to get, because you get 5 gold if you heal for every hit point that you heal of somebody. But it's like if we go to town and then there's like, the night quester has 3,000 gold and all the other guys have like 1,000. He's already leveled up. He's like, well, I'm going to throw you 1,000 so you can level up. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not in the rules. So that's kind of back to my point. If you're a really strict board gamer, you have to kind of figure out that balance here with this game. So again, it would be nice if a modern game, was like an app or something that could control all of that stuff, or not control the gameplay. Like let the gameplay happen. Not like don't even get the app involved with the boards and the moving and the fighting the monsters and all that stuff. Just have it control like some of the really broad strokes, high level campaign stuff. Generate events and things like that. Things that are you have to write down and stuff like that. I think there's room for that. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I would not recommend going out and picking this up and generating and printing out all this stuff, unless you really want to. And I would recommend it, but it's a lot of work, and you may not really like some of that stuff, and you'll have to fudge some of the really small details on the rules. So in a way, I would recommend it, but I mean, yeah, don't be insane. don't actually do that. But I would recommend picking up Shadows of Brimstone. Now again, the thing with Shadows of Brimstone is you cannot just go pick up a base set. With that, you have to pick up extra stuff. With this, I think you could get away with doing the base set, but again, I think it needs the extra stuff. And I think that's probably part of the problem with this style of game, is there's only so much that you can fit in a box. So the number of events and different monsters you're going to run into and the different sort of quests and stuff, like you're going to kind of run it's going to run its course. So what I did is, I got this, I liked it, so I got more stuff for it. Now there's enough stuff. And I might pick up some more stuff from the guy that did the Hag Queen expansion. He's got a bunch of other stuff that's it looks amazing. I've read through it. But just to go through the trouble of print them out, print some cards, print up the boards and stuff that come out with it. I mean, he's got all that stuff. And, that's just some work and stuff. But so if I do get sick of this or whatever, and then I could just print out a couple of books and a couple of pages of boards and print on some poster board and away to go. But getting back to my real recommendation of Shadows of Brimstone, you can't just get the base box with that. You can play a couple times and you're gonna be like, I'm done with this. I've seen these monsters, but you got to get like the base box and a few expansions. That's kind of one of the problems of this style game. You need that extra stuff to mix in the variety, so you can have different types of adventures and stuff, and you theme up the monster decks or whatever if you really wanted to do that, to tell yourself a little bit more cohesive story and really kind of balance the narrative yourself that way. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of do this. Some folks had actually asked me about it because I posted on Instagram and stuff like that. So I was like, all right, fine. It's just like a show and tell, whatever. This is stuff that I've done. But I just really had a good time with this. And it's really any kind of credit and stuff that, people are like, oh, people are nostalgic for this game, whatever. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. The game is actually really good with some of those caveats that I talked about. It's really, I don't know. it's a test. You know, it's a milestone. It's an icon of this style of game, and there's not really been anything to really touch it other than Shadows of Brimstone, which in a lot of ways improves on it. Yeah. So there you go. Warhammer Quest. Great. Thanks.